Hello and welcome to another episode of the Gritty Hour. I have a special guest today, Christopher Ryan, who's like myself and my cohort, well, I'll introduce in a second, is also from the Bronx, specifically Parkchester in the Bronx. So this is like old home week here. So welcome to the Gritty Hour, Christopher.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right. And we have a friend of yours, Mr. George Bauer, who's been on the podcast several times in the past out of Las Vegas. Welcome back, George.
How are you?
Hello, everybody. Chris, greetings. Thomas,
Greetings,
thank you for having me, as
Thank
always.
you, George and Chris.
Yes, thanks for having me.
So, Chris, I was going to ask you about this last book, Soul Scream Antholozine.
Yes.
It's a magazine anthology. Yes.
Yeah, it's a mix of both. I serve as secretary of the New York chapter of the Horror Writers Association, and last Halloween, one of the Barnes Noble out by me, I'm in New Jersey now, they were looking for readers, and I got about 10 horror authors. We did a night of, Halloween themed horror stuff. And while I was looking at it, I was like, wow, I'd love to work with these guys again, guys, girls, everything. And that was the beginning. And then I went to the big convention for the Horror Writers Association is a thing called StokerCon. And they have it different locations every year. And a year ago, I think it was May, they had it in Denver. And I thought that would be cool. Let's go and see it. And I found out that the combination of the altitude and my crappy lungs from a lot of asthma and allergies growing up, I couldn't breathe. I just couldn't breathe. So I kept sneaking up to my room and looking for something to help calm me down. And it was the souvenir book that they put out. And I grabbed it, and it had short stories. It had author profiles. It had related pop culture. And I said, yes, this is what I'd like to do with those people. And that's how we mixed it up. It looks kind of like an anthology, and it reads like a magazine. So I put the two words together, Antholozine. It's the only Antholozine out there.
Sounds cool. Sounds original. Yeah. Georgie, you read a couple of his books, I think.
I did some of the crime books, but what I'd like to start first, my first question, I think, is having to do how did he get here? Chris, how did you get here with your writing and your college, and what led to the different, because you do a lot of different things with your writing.
We do.
Yeah, so take us back a little bit to where it started and what.
Yeah, like I said, I had a lot of allergies and stuff growing up. So every spring, the planet would try and kill me. And I would the only two things I could do is, either read something or write in a notebook or draw or whatever. So all of that kind of developed from a very young. And then when we were in Spelman together, I wound up doing the literary magazine. I'd put really bad poetry in there. And then I had a music column in the school newspaper. So that led to pursuing both creative writing and journalism in college. I went to SUNY New Paltz. That went to local Bronx newspapers. I worked on almost all of them. I worked on the Bronx Times Reporter, the Bronx Press Review. Then I did some time on the Chief Leader down in Manhattan. And then I came back, and the Bronx Times people wanted a crime newspaper, and they called it the Bronx Bulletin. It was really short-lived, but
Bronx Press Review, that brings me back.
Bronx Press Review, yeah. And it was during like the crack days, so we were running body counts in the center teaser box, like 10 dead, or 12 dead, 25 wounded, like every week.
Wow.
So we did a lot of stuff that our predecessor wouldn't have touched. He was much more jamming as much the press releases and not a lot of byline stories. But another Spelman guy, Eric Gerard, and I wound up taking it over. And we tried to compete with the dailies, which was insane. But we would just run 12-hour days, run around trying to get news stories, and got to know some of the cops, and they'd call up around 2 or 3 in the morning. Hey, I got a big, crack bust. I need to take the picture of the big table with guns and, just rolls and rolls of crack files and stuff. And I had to write about somewhere between 12 and 15 stories a week. So that was really where I cut my teeth in learning how to assess, organize, and write quickly, edit. And I never get writer's block or anything like that, because there was no time when you were working on the Bronx Weeklies to stop and think, oh, I don't know what to write. You just wrote. So,
Right.
and I still do that now.
So that obviously that's the background for the crime
Right.
books and the
Right.
crime. Now,
Yeah.
where do we get into the other genres
Well,
that you read?
Well, I started the two. There's 2 crime novels. They're being rebooted now. What I mean by that is I own them as independently published, and they're never going to go anywhere else. So during COVID, I worked with an editor and really polished them up. So that's going to what was City of Woe is going to probably come out around Labor Day. So I started them as straight crime books, but the supernatural kept creeping in. The Blackjack, which is a friend of mine, when I started writing his stuff, was high adventure. And then I did Genius High, which just got rebooted, and that has a touch of sci-fi in it, but it's I was a high school English teacher for 25 years, and it's based on those kids and high stakes testing. It got so crazy that I was like, well, what's one step further? Well, they would dose the kids to raise their IQs and raise the scores, and that's where that kind of high school thriller came from. And then
Not to interrupt you, but what does
Please.
rebooting mean?
I've grown as a writer since they first came out.
Mhm.
So when COVID hit, you wound up with a lot of time. I was working full time as a teacher, but you're still, how much Netflix can you watch, right?
Mhm.
So I went through some contacts. I found a really reliable, good, kind of over my pay grade editor, but she gave me a price break, and I hired her to kick my ass. I wanted it to be the very best it could be. So City of Woe got rewritten, Simple Rebellion got rewritten, and Genius High. You see City of Pain, that will get rewritten once all of these are out. By the way, the picture on the cover of City of a Pain is a still from a movie I was in.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it's another thing we do. I did some.
What was the name of the movie?
It's called Clandestine, and won a couple of awards at the World Fest Houston, and now it's on Paramount Plus. You can see it's a slow, crime, like kind of a potboiler, probably in the same vein of as Heat, but not with the same cast. We did have Tom Sizemore in there, but everyone else is local people. But yeah,
George, you read, I think you mentioned before we started recording, you read City of Woe.
City of Woe and City of Pain, and I think I have City of Sin in Florida. I haven't.
Right. City of Sin's short stories, and
Oh yeah,
eventually
I did
I'll
start
expand
a little
each of
bit of
those.
that.
Yeah.
I did start a little bit of that, and I enjoyed them. They were, like I was saying offline, there were some great musical references about a
Yeah.
Who concert, and I don't want to give away too much of the story,
Yeah.
but if Chris wants to, you know,
With-
because that's a good connection with the three of
Yeah.
us, with our music likes and being
Yeah.
able to put it into writing.
The main characters in the City series, which are going to be renamed after these characters, because those two get mentioned more than anything else, any of the other characters I've created. They're called, their names are Mallory and Gunner. And Mallory's kind of a straight-laced, serious family guy, and Gunner is not. He is big in every way possible. He's got a big soul, big heart, kind of like a linebacker gone to seed, very big appetites, and weirdly, ladies who have read that love Gunner. I don't know what it is about him. But I had been working with a friend of George's and I, Jean Michael Akey, who was sergeant of detectives somewhere in Manhattan for a bunch of years. And as George can attest, loved to keep me in my place and kick my ass. Our verbal jousts were just very, very amusing. So I asked him to, it had to work on the level of, if a cop read it, he wouldn't throw it across the room. So he vetted every part of it. And like I said, it's got, some supernatural elements in there. So to ground them very vividly in what would and wouldn't happen with a police procedural was really helpful.
To those who are new to the podcast, George is a retired NYPD. Did you find that thematic references true, George?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And like you were mentioning, the other thing is the rock and roll. There's references to that all the way through. And there is a scene that happens at a Who concert. They were joking that it was half a Who and that they were old, so it's still, still kind of fits. And then the two detectives have to go to the garden, and the Teamsters are finishing up breaking it down, and they get to talk to some very colorful Teamsters, just putting little bits and pieces together. I think they come out of the garden with 300 potential suspects because of where something happened.
No. When does it take place? Post Keith Moon?
Yeah, it's actually post Entwistle too.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
it's relatively recently. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I consciously didn't date it, but the Who is something that's going to tie it to a certain era. But it was about, it's about what, in that way, what we cling to and what, in this case, police fight for, family, beliefs, that kind of stuff.
How'd you find the read, George?
I enjoyed it. I mean, I didn't. I don't read much, to be honest. Usually, if there's I know the author or it's a series of things that I like. Usually, the crime stuff I always connect with. So I enjoyed it very much, and the fact there was musical references, it happened at a concert, and a lot of other things there within. And plus, Chris is a friend, so
So
I appreciate it.
He does his research before he puts a pen to paper.
Yeah. So that'll come back out as Mallory and Gunner Infernal. That's the first time I've publicly announced that it's going to be renamed. And then we'll go from there. The reason for that is that when I first put out City of Woe, then City of Pain, City of Sin, there weren't a lot of City of titles. But since then, there's got to be 40 or 50 now. And you just, at a certain point, it drags down your ability to stand out, and be judged on your own. So when I was rewriting it, I said, okay, we'll push the character names and go from there. But
You have a co-author on some of these, or?
No, everything is me except Soul Scream. I put on a different hat. All of these were written Genius High, all the City They're all written by me. The Blackjack, I'm contracted because that's Alex Simmons's character. So every one of those that I wrote, they're based on his character, and he gets the final say and all that.
Mm.
And then Soul Scream, I'm an editor, publisher.
Right.
And I wound up doing a lot of different things that I wanted to do to give it kind of a different feel. I do have one short story in the collection, and it stars a character named Desdemona de la Cruz, who lives in Brooklyn. She was a rock musician gigging around Brooklyn, and someone tried to rob the gig, and she stepped in the way and got killed and got a chance to come back and make it right. So she's kind of a revenant of sorts, but with a few more elements to her. And she's as much at the mercy of that being a revenant as she is trying to live her own life. So she can't gig anymore because when something goes wrong, she gets pulled to that place. So she'll be in the middle of a song and gone. But she did get a job. She's the assistant editor of Soul Scream Antholozine. So you kind of have a little meta thing going. And
so that magazine, that Antholozine,
yeah.
Do I have to pay you a royalty every time I use that word?
No. Again, it was an idea of trying to make it as fun as possible.
Right, but it's a magazine. Basically, the theme behind it is a series of stories, like horror stories.
Yeah, well, I was very conscious in what I asked everyone for.
Mm-hmm.
The subgenres of horror that are very big now are splatterpunk and extreme horror. I can't hang with that. You know, the extreme horror it just knocks me right out of the story.
Mm.
What I cut my teeth on were anthologies like a one called Primeval or Stephen King's Night Shift. And that was a lot more of what they call quiet horror, which is, you know, there might be something in the story that you think about or that kind of haunts you a little bit after you put the book down, but it's not a bucket of blood, you know? So that's what I asked for. I told them soft R at the very most. And everybody, there's, I think 10 or 12 authors in there, and all of them had something that they wanted to include. What happened was it became a celebration of all the subgenres that fall under the horror umbrella. So in there we have psychological horror, we have pulpy crime horror, we have Irish folk and rock and roll horror mixed together. That's a really interesting mix. Then there's a fantasy horror. There's a modern take on werewolves and vampires too. But just a mix of all those different things. Again, when I was growing up, some days I'd have a stack of comic books next to me, and I just would read and read. And from one to the next, it's a completely different style, right? If you're reading a Captain America, that might be one way. But then if you read Man-Thing or Werewolf by Night, it's a whole different feel. And then, you know, a Batman detective story or whatever. So I would go through all these different styles, and that's what I'm trying to include here. As a matter of fact, we're getting the next volume out. It's going to be called Soul Scream Antholozine, Dark Justice. So it's all horror, but with some kind of crime or justice element to it. You know, the monster gets its comeuppance, or the human monster that created whatever gets the comeuppance, that kind of stuff. There's just a lot of different styles within the horror style that aren't all blood and guts. And God bless the people who can do that and the fans who love that. But this is a different thing. It's going a completely different direction, and hopefully people will like that.
And it might be the road less traveled somewhat in that genre.
It seems to be right now. It seems to be right now, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a good approach.
Yeah. Let me mention to the audience that if you're looking to contact Chris, or he's got a Twitter handle. It is at Chris Ryan Writes. That's his Twitter handle.
Yep.
He's available on Facebook as Christopher Ryan Author. So that's just a couple of the, and obviously Tom has brought up his Amazon page if you're interested in any of the stuff that
Insta is Chris Ryan Writes as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll use this moment to bring up Christopher also hosts a podcast on.
Yes.
Well, primarily YouTube, or you're on the other streams as well?
It's both audio and YouTube. For a while, we kind of got away from YouTube, and I was advocating that we return to it. And I guess the last 4 or 5 episodes have been back to YouTube, and we're getting strong response to that. So I think we'll continue doing both.
Yeah, good. That's Tell the Damn Story is the name of the podcast.
Story, yep.
Yeah.
It started as 3 of us, myself, Alex Simmons, and an artist who would draw on screen as we spoke. And now it's just me and Alex. That other guy got too big. God bless him. So we talk about almost everything.
It's kind of a writer's nook, as I went through
exactly. Yeah. If we can ease another writer's journey by some of the experiences we have done or we've had, that's what we're trying for.
Right.
Or if we can, sometimes people get depressed, or they get, I can't do this, I'm not made for this. There's always the editor on your shoulder. We do a lot of talking about that, and occasionally we have guests, that come in. Not as far ranging as your guests. Your guests are pretty interesting. They seem to have a tie-in from the Bronx or from Wall Street, but they go everywhere. They go everywhere. Yeah.
That there's your co-host on the podcast, Tell the Damn Story podcast. Have you written anything with him?
He's the owner and creator of Blackjack. So I've written some stuff with.
Oh, is that the gentleman you were referring to before? Yeah. Okay.
Alex Simmons, and he's won a bunch of awards. He has, he's written Batman, Archie, Scooby-Doo. He created a character for Batman that I think it was around for about 5 or 10 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah. A character named Orpheus, really very underrated, and everyone else rises from the dead. They should bring Orpheus back. But he's written a ton of things, some nonfiction, but mostly fiction. And his character Blackjack has won a bunch of awards. The ones that are listed on the author page, Alex and I came up with them as rapid reads. This was before novelettes became famous. Novelette is shorter than a novella, longer than a short story. So we played around, and the first time I wrote for Alex, it was in Badass Mofo magazine. Now that is, come on. I am so proud of being able to say I was in Badass Mofo magazine. But it was a comic strip, 10-part comic strip. And I wrote everything. I was so proud and all that. He said, yeah, this will be great. And then it came out and was published. Alex had rewritten every line of the dialogue, because I still, after 10 years of pushing him, I still didn't have the exact ear right, the exact tone right. And I kept working at it. And then when I got good enough, I wrote a couple of short stories for him. And then we kind of took off on these rapid read stories that you can knock out in a sitting, but also, again, all ages. Your grandpa who grew up on pulp would love it. Anybody who grew up on Indiana Jones would love it. And then the kids can read it as well.
Right.
So, yeah. The one that's on screen now, Dark End of the Rainbow, I had pitched to Alex as, let's co-write it. And my pitch was Blackjack is an African-American soldier of fortune in the 1930s.
Mm.
I want him to have to go to the set of The Wizard of Oz. And Alex said, that one's all you. But I was able to do crime noir style, but on that setting. There was murders on the, in and around that set, and we had a lot of fun with that. So it's that kind of stuff.
The reviews are all glowing on your
Yeah.
on your Amazon page. Yeah.
He fights early Nazis. And that kind of stuff, and he's very resourceful, and he deals with, let's call it what it is, he deals with the racism of the age, and in a lot of ways, in a lot of places, there's that still exists, so it resonates with people.
Yeah. And that's a 3-part series as of right now.
They're all standalone. You can pick up
Okay.
anyone in any order. You'll get a little background as who he is, and then the story just takes off.
Yeah.
Alex tends to take about a chapter or two to set everything up meticulously. I shoot the gun within the first paragraph. Go.
Sounds interesting. I think I might delve into this series.
Yeah, they're fun.
George, did you touch on this one?
No, I haven't, but
Yeah.
I think I'm going to. I didn't know enough about them, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
But do you have a favorite, Chris? I mean, is there something that you really like going back to?
As far as Blackjack,
No, any of the different genres.
any of
that
these,
you do.
well, I like it's like asking which is your favorite kid,
I know.
I like Genius High because there's I put 25 years into high school, and this hits that really well, but grown-ups can read it too, and it's an interesting, it's just one touch of sci-fi. What if they released something into the into the school that would raise everyone's IQs? Sounds like what could go wrong, right? Everything goes wrong. So I love that. I love the pace. I love the characters in that. A Simple Rebellion, I'm fiercely proud of. It does scare some people, but if we look at the divides of this country right now, right, and we say, well, if it keeps going this way, what would it look like in a near future? And that's the setting for this. And then I took a depressed former comedy icon. Part of the model might be Bill Murray, right? And Wilder would be another part of him. And he did a bunch of movies with, to think of Pryor or Samuel L. Jackson, a mix of those two characters. So this comedian is depressed. His wife was killed, and he just got out of the business. And a late night talk show tricks him into appearing. He thinks it's his grandkids calling, and when he realizes who it is, and the guy's trying to push him to, why'd you leave us? What did I? He says, well, let's just say I called in sick. That's what I did. And you know what? I think more people should. And he meant call in sick to your show, you idiot, But America takes it as, this is what we should do because we're so frustrated with the country. So he accidentally starts a very simple rebellion. People stop, they call in sick, they stop ordering out food, they just kind of grind the country to a halt, and it becomes a chase movie, a chase novel and all this stuff, but always from a comedian's point of view. And as he's going, and as he starts seeing how people Americans still believe in the idea of America. That kind of revives him too, gives him hope again. So ultimately, this entire book is about the idea of America, that everyone can go out there and, put the effort in and find a place for themselves,
Hmm.
you know.
So
Sounds
what's
like an
the,
interesting concept. Excuse me, George.
that's all right. So what's the reboot about? What are you
Okay.
changing to the
Well, I started at page 1, and I tried to improve every sentence, every paragraph, every chapter of A Simple Rebellion, A Genius High, and then the City series. And I
Right.
worked with this editor who, she really liked my original stuff, but she says, yeah, you can write this better. So her job was to call me on any kind of indulgence if the scene went on too long. You always want to look at a scene and enter as late as you can and leave as soon as you can, right? As early as you can. So a lot of the fat was cut out from the earlier versions. With City of Woe, you saw the bad guy in the beginning and at the very end, but now you see him throughout. And that kind of helps,
develop the character?
develop that whole side of the story that was underdeveloped. So
Sure.
those kind of things. Now they're going to be part of my back catalog, and the way they are now, as they're coming out again, that's them, and I can move forward with a clear conscience. I didn't feel like they were the very best I could do, but now I feel that I'm giving people the very best I can for their money. I try not to charge too much for them. And now that I've done that, I've started to go towards traditional publishing as well. I'll continue putting independent stuff out, but I'm submitting stories. I've gotten, I guess, somewhere between 8 and 12 published in different anthologies and places like that. Or a couple of online places early on, like Shotgun Honey, really short, tight crime pieces. I got one in it. Here's the strangest anthology. It was a Johnny Cash based anthology, entirely based on an album of Johnny Cash's that I had never heard. He has a lot of famous albums. This one I didn't know about. And each short story is named after one song on that album. And I wound up connecting with one of the songs, gave the pitch, and things worked out. But
You wrote the whole thing without hearing one song from the album?
no, I went and downloaded the album and just listened.
Before you started writing, or after?
Yeah, well, I looked at it was still an open call, and it's all right. These 3 songs or these 4 songs are taken. These are still open. So I left that on my computer, downloaded it, and just listened to those songs. And there were 2 that resonated. So here's my idea. So I wrote them like a 3-sentence pitch for 3 of the songs. And he came back and said, these are great. These are all great, but I want you to do this one. And that's what I wrote.
It's an interesting concept to do that, though.
Yeah, it was a great writing exercise because it didn't, the writing situation didn't come from me, but the song inspired, and the story is very different than the lyrics of the song, but echoes from a completely different point of view.
Yeah, that was my question when you were explaining it. What do you take the lyrics and expand on them? Do you change the story? Is there do you use the melody maybe as as how you write it?
Well, music is a big part of my writing process.
Sure.
Now, what I tend to do, I'll tell you what I tend to do with my big writing, but for this one, the song was called I Couldn't Help But Cry. And I just played it, I'd walk the dog or, whatever, and it would I would play it again and again. And then once I got the idea, I think I would play it once a day just before I started writing. And it was a Johnny Cash style song, male point of view. But I kept seeing a female point of view. I'm not a female. And I was gonna, it was gonna be just a reverse. She was gonna be in love with the guy, and whatever was going to happen would happen to the guy, instead of damsel in distress. Sometimes your writing doesn't cooperate with you, and she turned out to have a girlfriend. I didn't know anything about that. It wasn't the original plan, but it just wouldn't go away. And since everything happened in the bar, like the song, and at least that's what inspired me. It wasn't. I didn't need. These days, people want sensitivity readers and all that sort of stuff. This one was written before that became popular, and two, I wasn't on foreign ground as far as emotions were concerned, and I didn't get that deep into their lives in that arena. So, it's a short story. You can really only tell that one moment, or the, one or two moments of that person's existence, establish that she worked for this kind of scary guy. Someone comes in, catches her eye, then that scary guy ruins it, right? Or whatever. It's not the depth of a novel. So I didn't have to worry about insulting anybody.
I'll ask you something that I've asked other writers.
Sure.
Do you find like you have a concept of a story when you sit down to start writing it? Sometimes the story takes you to an entirely different place than what you intended to go.
Yeah. City of Woe was going to be a straight cop story. I had no plans for supernatural whatsoever, know. And I'll tell you another thing about City of Woe, which will eventually come out as Mallory and Gunner, Infernal. Layers started happening with this. First, I wanted to write about cops. So I come from a police family. My brother, my father, my uncle. I know a lot of cops, George, Gene, onwards. I even applied and went all the way through, was accepted in the NYPD. And, sometimes the classes take a long time to get called in. And in the meantime, I started teaching, and, that's
Where'd you teach, in the Bronx or Jersey?
I taught for 5 years in the Bronx at John Philip Sousa Middle School across from Spelman. And then when my kids were born, we followed my wife's parents out to Jersey because they moved from the Bronx to Jersey. Their other son was out there, and my wife kept driving out to visit them. And then, they were missing each other, Sicilian. And, she'd come back across Bronx all teary-eyed. That didn't seem like a safe thing for me. So I said, well, if you want to live over there, I don't care where I live. I just wanted her to be happy. So we wound up over there. And I was fine commuting until we wound up having twins. And someone had to be on that side of the bridge. Turned out that a guy who started mentoring me at Sousa in the Bronx lived in Jersey and knew a few people, and he dropped my resume around. And just like in the Bronx, where I think I kind of got the job because they needed someone to fill a class of, just like ease the other teachers, and this guy was a sucker, put him in there. I think I got hired because the middle school was having a hard time, and they thought if he could survive in the Bronx, he'd be able to survive in Hackensack. And then I wound up, it was a mutually beneficial. I loved teaching. Remember, when I was a reporter, I used to do body counts, 12 dead, 27 wounded, or whatever. And the one thing I never expected when I walked into a school, I mean, I was going to write, like, for the Village Voice, expose on how schools suck. That's how bad my attitude was. And when I walked into the school, a building full of living, breathing, just energetic, live kids, after reporting on all those dead kids, it was the most shocking, exhilarating experience of my life. I didn't expect to be so thrilled to be in a building full of kids, and that stayed with me for, I'd say, 28 of the 30 years I was a teacher.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an interesting story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, especially after, I mean, most of the body counts were, at that time, it was the crack war. So it was, 15-year-old kids getting caught in gunfire, shootouts and stupid stuff like that. So to see them live, that was really great. And,
Yeah. Changed your whole perspective.
it definitely did.
Mm.
And every once in a while, one of them would really, burst into finding themselves in writing. And in that way, I kept a hand in, and I would do all the writing related activities in the various schools.
Did you write a lot when you were actually teaching?
Yeah, I did a bunch of different things. I wrote screenplays. I wrote some of these novels. Early on, I did some stand-up, and then I did some sketch comedy. I got involved with that indie film company, and I wrote sketches for their first movie, Lock, Load, Love, and we wound up cutting it up, and it was on Funny or Die for a long time.
Oh.
And then I wound up, they needed help with producing. So if you go to see Clandestine on Paramount Plus, there's a police raid, and we used my house because my wife is really, really, really generous. Funny story about that. We hired a bunch of off-duty New York City cops who they hired out as, if you needed a police raid or all that sort of stuff. And I had done everything I needed to do to get the right paperwork to film without, causing a ruckus on my block. And so they lined up like 8 cops, and they got what would look like, I guess, semi-automatic rifles or whatever and all that sort of stuff. And even though I was required to go house by house and show them and give them a flyer and tell them maybe someone was not home or they didn't pay attention to what I was saying. So they called up and they said, the FBI is raiding a house. What the hell's going on with this neighborhood? And they sent a squad car over, and it's a small town, right? So the cop, his kids and my kids were in Little League together. So he was like, hey, Chris, what is going on here? And I said, we talked to the chief, and I went through everything. He says, I have to inspect the guns. Are those real guns? I was like, you're going to love this. And the cops came over, solid plastic. They were awesome. So no problem whatsoever. One more story from Clandestine. The opening credits, there's a lot of fire engine, flashing lights, cop cars, and all that sort of stuff. That was shot outside my house, completely unplanned, because we were shooting late one night in the house, and we had the entire caravan of equipment. This is indie film work for you. We had a family van and a sedan. That's all. These other film crews have tractor trailers, 2 cars. That's what we had. And a drunk driver came flying around the corner. Only time I ever saw a drunk driver on this block. She was texting or looking on the phone and speeding, and she hit the parked family van head on. It was parked, and she moved it 30 to 35 feet.
Wow.
Then rode up the front of it, landed on the side, and momentum took her, slammed her into the sedan. And And we go running out. What the hell is that? We see, and these guys start going towards. I said, you can't. You got to call the cops. You can't help them, right? So I call the local cops. I said, this is what's happening. And by the way, fellas, we have the paperwork done. We're filming a movie in here, and we're dressed as cops. He goes, you better not be when we show up. So everybody had to take their costumes off, and they're all standing there in undershirts and whatnot. And the cinematographer says, oh, just stand on. No one should. None of you guys show your faces. So we all turned back, and some of the other neighborhood was around. And he went around and all shot footage with all, and that became the opening of the movie.
Jeez.
The opening credits.
Do you have to give the drunk driver credit?
We never did. She didn't she was walking around afterwards saying where she had been and who she had been drinking with and where she was going. And the next day she went to our town's police department to pick up her car. She thought it was just a DWI or maybe a flat tire. And they took her around back, and this thing was a pancake.
Wow.
She had no memory.
What? Chris, when the Mallory and Gunner series becomes a movie, Georgie is available.
Yes. Georgie would be fantastic.
Get him right on a plane, right onto the
Which one?
There you go.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
But that brings me to a question, actually. I almost know this answer already because the way you're talking about things. You have a movie going on in your head when you're writing?
Yeah, definitely. I watch a lot of films and a lot of cops and all, shows and all that stuff. So I think visually, but also the authors that I studied: Elmore Leonard, Richard Price, Dennis Lehane, Walter Mosley. They are very cinematic in their styles. So that's the style that I developed as well. What I don't do is I don't spend a lot of time talking about what shade of blue the walls are and stuff like that. You're in a living room. If it's pertinent to the plot, I'll mention it. Otherwise, we all assume we know what a living room looks like. Let's get to the story.
Right.
Dialogue and action. And I do character playlists, and I'll listen to that as I'm walking around, or I'll do novel playlists, songs that I think would be played in the movie of the book, and then I see them all. There's an author, Carol, I forget her last name, hopefully it'll come to me. She's written a billion books. I saw her speak one time, and she's a runner, and she starts to run with the first line or the first scene of the novel she's working on in her head. And she runs as she's watching the entire novel. And she doesn't write the novel until she can run and see the entire story without a glitch. She works it out until she sees it all, and then she just types it up. Wow. So while I don't run, I'll walk. I don't run like that. I'll see it. I'll read it out loud in character. I'll pace around and how would this actually work? And, if you were driving through this, or if you were having this fight or this, what would the blocking look like? And that'll influence a bit of what I do there. Yeah.
Do you feel that when you're reading it, George?
Yes, very much.
Thank you, George.
Yeah,
that's $20 well spent.
Oh, you didn't get the Kindle version, huh?
No, I'm talking about the $20. I agree.
Oh, to send him a check. Yeah. Hey, you can go ahead and cash that now, George. Yeah. So one other question. I also asked this about other authors. Who does your book covers? Especially this one here, the one I was looking at before, the the Blackjack series. Is Mr. Simmons illustrate that?
No, Mr. Simmons does not. Let me see. Here he is. Tim Felder
Okay.
who was the original third person in Tell the Damn Story. He's done most of those covers for us. I was just looking at, I want to make sure I had Tim Felder correct. He has a book out called Infinitum. So because he started with us, when we started taking off with these, he said, I'll do your covers and all that sort of stuff. He was experimenting with early digital and motion. You see most of them have a lot of motion in there. One time he was drawing and he wanted us just to say different things about what could possibly be in the illustration. And he drew Blackjack waving this flag. It was a white flag with a red star. And it looked like most of the town had been destroyed in a war. And it was he finished the whole thing in one episode. And then he turned around and he said, now one of you guys have to write the story. And I wound up writing that story. And if you go to Alex Simmons's author page or his website, you can get that for free.
Oh.
Eventually, when my website goes back up, you'll be able to get it for free for me. But right now, my website's under construction.
But the other gentleman you mentioned did all your book covers?
No, just the Blackjack.
The Blackjack series. Okay.
If we look at Simple Rebellion and Genius High, that's a talented young lady out in the Northwest region there. I think it's Washington she's from. And she does those. And
pretty interesting covers.
It's a great process where she says, give me some idea of the book. And then I'll tell her, and then she'll send some image, and I'll say, yes, but more of this, or no, more of that. For Genius High, for example, that had, I taught at Hackensack High School, and I'd gone to Hackensack High School after all the kids were gone with a couple of packets of ketchup. And I sprayed it on my hand, and I smacked my hand on the side of the locker. And then I took an angle shot on the lockers, and that was the original cover. But one of the things I was doing in creating these reboots, was I was hiring professional covers. So when she was going, she said we were having a hard time on the main image of the Genius High's cover, and she says, tell me about some of the characters. One of the characters in there is a guy named that the students call Creepy Grin. So when she heard that, she was like, okay, I think I know. And that's what that became. So
he does have a creepy grin.
Yes, he does.
Well, she did a great job. All the book covers are pretty cool looking.
Soul Scream, that cover is a guy in Argentina. I went on Fiverr looking for somebody, and that wound up working. The second issue is also by him, and when you put them together, they're in the same bar. So yeah, he did the logo there. That is the Soul Scream, and then if you see in the back right corner, there's Desdemona de la Cruz. And here's a little story about Des. When I created her, the only name I had was Desdemona. And I thought she was probably Italian or something, coming from Brooklyn. And I hired Juan Cruz Prats is his name. He's from Argentina. And I hired him to draw some characters, sketches for Des. And when he sent them back to me, she was Latina. She looks Latina. And plenty of Latinas in Brooklyn. I was fine with that. I said, well, what's her name going to be? So De La Cruz is a tribute to him, of the Cruz, of Juan Cruz Prats. And that's how she got her name.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So you had to rewrite the whole thing, or how did that?
Well, no, I was, just like I'm Irish, but I don't have a brogue. Or I'm also part Spanish, but you'd never see any of that in me. What you hear and what you see is probably, as you two probably recognize, more Bronx than anything else, right?
Right.
That's because I'm second, third generation,
I throw Irish at you.
Oh, there you go. A little bit in there.
I can see at the end of the bar there.
But Bronx Irish, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
She's second or third generation in Brooklyn. And
Uh-huh.
if you're in a place, Bronx or the Brooklyn, for those, you grow up, the neighborhood seeps in. Even if you're living with an extended family, the neighborhood still seeps in. And that's, I write her more from the neighborhood than, some deep ethnic thing.
Right. So the ethnicity or the name didn't affect the outcome of the story.
No, the story
essentially-
was written with just the word Desdemona or
Right.
Des, and once the rest of it came, when I was introducing her, I added that
right.
as again, it's just a tip of the hat, because I recognized her immediately as the character I wanted to write about, but she was clearly looked more Latina than I had anticipated,
Right.
and I wanted to honor that. So
Yeah, that's a cool move. Yeah.
Yeah.
Georgie,
No.
how will you and Chris know each other now? Let's get it out.
But we went to high school together. We actually, believe it or not, Tom, for a while there, my grandparents, my dad's parents, lived on the same floor of his apartment building.
Yep.
Across the
was in-
street from Proc just a beer.
Yeah, I was in.
He did mention he was from the
1D.
north.
Yeah.
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 I was in 1D and they were in 1F. They were just 2 apartments away.
Wow.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they had lived up on the 3rd floor for years, and I forget exactly when, but they moved down to that
Mhm.
that apartment. And
Well, you
I
met him
didn't
in
even
Cardinal
know when they
Spellman,
lived up
right?
there.
Yeah, that's when we really knew each other. In Parkchester, of so many people, but
Well, Chris went to St. Raymond's Grammar
St.
School,
Raymond's Grammar
Grammar
School,
School, yeah.
and you guys were Helena's,
right? Yeah.
Right.
and then Spellman was where I met George on the bus.
Yeah.
I remember very early on sitting in the bus next to George, just running my mouth as I was wont to do, and he just leaned over and said, "You're gonna get your ass kicked." And I almost did. There was a guy that you knew more than I did, Tim Curtin.
Oh
And
yeah,
I was
Tim Curtin. Yeah.
and I was just ranking on different people, just goofing around. And I would rank on myself too. But the next day in class, he came up to me, and I mean, this is freshman year, still September. He already was about 6'2". And I looked like an afro on a stick. I was just, 80 pounds maybe. And he says, "I ever hear you talking about me again, I'm going to kick your ass." And it's like, well, Tim, hold on a minute. I'm just goofing around. And it took a day or two. And then he was like, "Yeah, I see that's how you are."
Timmy Curtin, George?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he went to Raymond's High School.
No, he did a year. He did a year at Spelman, and I think he went to Columbus after
He
that.
went to Columbus.
Oh,
and he was,
okay.
Yeah, doing a lot of studying with his brother and gigging out. And then he went to Berkeley School of Music in Boston for about a year, and then felt there was nothing there for him. He wound up being a professional musician, toured with a lot of people. He did some things.
Did you know John Cummins?
I knew
cool.
him. He was from our part of the neighborhood. We
Little
always
older.
teased. He was Cumbo. We always teased him, even when he went into politics. The political part of things. We used to goof around with him, but he was very serious at that point.
Yeah, he ran against AOC.
God bless him.
Didn't win.
Well, yeah, but I kind of felt they needed someone to run against him, but I don't know how seriously. I don't know how much money they put. They maybe put good money behind him, but
Well, if she ever
I
leaves it,
expected to get opposition from both parties.
well, I was going to say if she ever leaves, it'll be because she got primaried. I don't think a Republican can win over there anymore.
Yeah, well, it's a Democratic section.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of stuff that kid has to learn too. But God bless him.
Yeah.
No.
Well, we certainly appreciate you coming on,
It's an
and
honor.
George, I appreciate you hooking us up together.
Happy to do it.
I'd like to have you back when the Mallory and what's the name of it?
Mallory and Gunner.
Yeah,
Infernal.
when that reboot comes out, we'll have you
Right,
back up and we'll run that up the flagpole.
That would be a lot of fun, and that's
Is that what you're
Well-
spending a lot of your time on, the reboot?
It's finished and edited and ready to go. I had to do 2 things. I had to get a cover, and that as you see with those covers, I try to get beyond my own skills with it, so people will look. And layout. I recently learned a program called Atticus that allows me to learn to lay out the interior of the book in a way that looks professional and is a you want to look professional, but you also want to have a little style. And this answer, I was in the desert searching for answers for months and months and months and months and months. And this is Soul Scream and Genius High were both laid out on it. So that's probably how I'll go with Mallory and Gunner.
What goes into a layout? I'm curious now.
Well, you want all the chapters to be in the right order. You want the font to be the right size.
Oh, I see what
you
you're
want
saying.
The chapter head. You want the page numbering. The front matter has to be correct legally. All that stuff. And I was doing it, and then when I laid it out, or when I would go to upload it at Amazon or some of the other places, but I'm mostly Amazon. There would be those rejections because this didn't, and it would take me weeks to figure out what this was or what that was. And with Atticus, all that goes away, and their program solves all those problems. So you just have to make, all right, what's the name of the chapter? What's the font you're going to, and they give you the fonts that are popular. So you're not going to go and use an unprofessional font and all that stuff. Right. So I had wanted to for Soul Scream, because it's fiction and then a nonfiction article about the author, or a nonfictional article about Mina Harkness from Dracula or some other related kind of pop culture thing. I wanted a way to be able to, for the reader to easily differentiate between, oh, that's fiction, that's fact. So I had Juan draw me two skulls. One skull has like steam or smoke coming out of it. And every time there's a fiction story, that shows up right before the title of the story. And then for the author profiles and the pop culture articles, it's another skull with glasses sitting on a couple of books. And when that appears, it's nonfiction, it's a magazine style article. So it's just that you're not, because otherwise you're looking at the headline and everything could be perceived as a short story or this. I didn't want that kind of confusion. So
right. I forgot to ask if you ever met Vic Ferrari.
I haven't met him, but I listened to your show with him. He's the one who does the
he went to Raymond's. I don't know if he's our age, George, is he?
I don't think so.
He's in the general vicinity, but I think he might be a couple of years younger than us.
I tell you what, I would bet money that my brother Bonnie knows him.
Yeah.
Bonnie knows everybody.
Yeah.
It just,
Yeah. Turns out Tommy McCarthy and he are friends, George. I forgot to tell you that.
Yeah, I saw that in a follow-up text, I think from Betty or someone.
Yeah.
But Chris, give us your contact information, and where can people get the book? And
the best thing to do is to go on Amazon. You can, if you go to Christopher Ryan, there's going to be two Christopher Ryans. One is going to try and sell you a book called Sex at Dawn. That's not me.
I bought that one already.
That's a sociologist or archaeologist or something.
That one's coming in the mail, Chris.
Yeah, that's talking about caveman sex. That's got nothing to do with me. I'm the one with the Soul Scream or the Cops or the Genius High. Chris Ryan writes at Twitter, Instagram, that kind of stuff. Christopher Ryan, author on Facebook. It looks like this.
Yep.
If you see this mug, you found the right place.
The link to the author page on Amazon and your Twitter name will be on the show notes right below the video or audio if you're listening to us on our audio streams. So, and we certainly appreciate you coming on tonight, Chris. It's been
a lot of fun.
Thanks. It was a pleasure to meet you. I never met you all these years in Parkhurst. We're the same age.
When I was listening to the show and then I watched it on YouTube, you sound familiar. And then you look familiar, but I can't place it, and I just blame it on George.
The North was like foreign territory.
What was the bar across from Helena's?
Welcome
Goonins.
in.
Well, Goonins are the welcome in.
Probably the welcome in.
Yeah.
If you were
Barrett's
there at
welcome in.
all, every once in a while I'd bump into you, George, and I would figure maybe it would, the crew you were with, maybe that's where we saw each other. Or
Oh,
something.
probably. I spent a
Yeah.
night or two in Barrett's. Yeah. Yeah. And
I broke away from that group for a while. Frankie Flynn, I tell
Yeah.
this story all the time. I'll tell it real quick, Tom.
Mhm.
Hanging out, I was just getting tired of the same place all the time. And all of a sudden, this big heavyset guy comes in and I meet him. It's Frankie Flynn.
Sure.
So we're talking and he's leaving. He goes, why don't you come with me? Well, I'll take you to the other side of town and I'll show you this other place. And he takes me over to Doyle's.
Sure.
And from
That's
Doyle's,
where.
I found Hurley's. And from
Right.
Hurley's, I found the Foggy Bottom.
Right.
And then within a year or two, I'm up in the neck. So it was just that meeting him led to, not that I didn't know you, but we didn't really hang out back at those.
Right, but we
times.
would bump into each other mostly at Doyle's. I didn't
Yeah,
do a lot
that's
of
right.
bar hopping, but when I
Yeah.
was in a bar, it was either Doyle's or there's a couple other places, but
And then I became friendly with Tara Walsh,
sure.
who introduced me to my wife.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Tara is magic.
She is.
well, the
Yes.
Bronx, especially the Bronx Irish, it's broken up either by schools or bars, the neighborhoods. So, but
We learn equally from both, right?
yeah, absolutely. Sometimes more from one. I won't mention which
true.
one. But anyway, we definitely appreciate you having you on. And when those rewrites come out, tap George on the shoulder. We'll have you back
Will.
on.
All right, now maybe we
Yeah.
can send some copies out to you. That would be
Yeah,
great.
that'll be great.
All right.
Have a great night,
Gentlemen,
man.
thank you very
so
much. Great
Thank
to
you,
see both
Chris.
of you. Take care.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye now.